The Hard Shoulder on Newstalk.
With Nissan. Let's go the distance by keeping our distance. Nissan. Innovation that excites.
Now, it's a pleasure to welcome back Eoghan Corry, editor of Travel Extra, and Cathal Guiomard, lecturer in aviation management in DCU. We've seen projected losses to the European aviation industry of 70 billion and globally $330 billion. Cathal, let's start with you. Do you think we'll see Chapter 11? We'll see airlines disappearing, and if so, who?
Well, so it depends really how much support governments can offer airlines around the world, whether they will need to go into Chapter 11 in the US and so on. I think, governments have limited resources, and the longer this continues and the more sectors of the economy that are looking for support, it may eventually just not be possible for governments to offer the support that they might do at the beginning. That may mean that governments have to make a choice over how much money to offer to aviation versus other sectors, and then within aviation, exactly who they want to be in existence early next year. They may have to select airlines from amongst the set of airlines in existence today, particularly in countries where there's a large number of airlines. So,
and how would state aid work? Because under EU rules, state aid is prohibited.
Well, the Competition Directorate in Brussels has issued a note essentially saying that under the very exceptional circumstances today, they will take a broader view than they normally would.
I see. And Eoghan, could you give us a kind of idea of the landscape of who's in jeopardy?
Ivan, the reality is that we've had a lot of aviation failures in the last 6 months in the lead-in to the crisis, and none since the crisis, which shows exactly as Cathal says, there's governments are jumping at the opportunity to use the special circumstances to do things like one of the first was Alitalia getting 500 million from the Italian government, and they would have been top of everyone's list for who's in jeopardy. Norwegian would be on top of everybody's list for who's in jeopardy. Their market capitalisation is down to less than half of one aircraft at the moment. They've got aid in from the Norwegian government. Not all the aid takes the same form. Some of it is cash. Iceland is the most extreme example of that. Some of it is government guaranteed loans. That's the sort of backing that Air France and KLM are getting from the Paris and Dutch governments. And some of it is very complex. We don't know exactly what Lufthansa's backing up is, but they're certainly getting backed by the German government. And some of these airlines were huge opponents of state aid until the beginning of March. Everything has changed since. We could have a situation where no airlines go under during this crisis, because we're back to the bad old days when every time they lose money, the governments shovel out more cash to them.
And do you think, Cathal, that people will fly less after this because video conferencing might replace business meetings, and a lot of people might be kind of hesitant to travel? They've burnt their fingers on lost deposits and lost bookings, and there might be a fear that they'll contract the virus.
So I think as regards business travel, the reliance on online meetings over the last month or so has certainly proven to many people who might have been sceptical that a surprising amount of business can be conducted online. So maybe there will be less business travel. On the public side, I mean, there's a big pent-up demand from travel that hasn't taken place this year. There may be people who want to visit elderly relatives because of the lockdown, or relatives who want to see younger relatives of their own. But certainly the distancing rules that have been introduced were very hard to make them stick, but they will certainly be very hard to dissolve as well. And I think none of us will stand beside a complete stranger ever again without eyeing them up fairly carefully and just wondering, are they going to cough on top of you, or what state of health will they be in? So situations which involved a lot of crowding in the past, which would include airlines, airports, buses, beaches, hotels and so on, I expect some difficulty about getting back to people being as free and easy as they used to be about mingling in these kind of situations.
Well, Owen, we hear a lot of never again, and then after a while things do get back to different. But do you think there will be new normals in terms of travel?
A lot of fear out there. The big question is, can it be conquered in the way it was conquered in the past, in the aftermath of 9/11, in the aftermath of SARS? It's amazing how people who are terrified to fly somewhere for €250 are less terrified when the price is 50. What we will see pretty clearly from one of our major airlines, Ryanair, is they're keeping their aircraft certified and their pilots certified. They're flying virtually empty aircraft and doing loops and takeoffs and landings and all of that at the moment. They're looking for a first mover advantage when everything clears, when a couple of things have to happen. Our restrictions are removed and we have to have somewhere to go to. What we would probably see is the mother of all seat sales to try and incentivize travel and find out how much of the mythical pent-up demand for travel is there already and how much can be incentivized. That's the dream scenario, but the reality is that nobody sees an end the July bookings really important to the Irish travel trade. They'll all be tackling those over the next few weeks, seeing if the restrictions creep that far. Interesting developments, for instance, in the Canary Islands, trying to separate themselves from mainland Spain directives. People looking at September, but a lot of people saying that most of the real travel in the scale that we used to do is not going to be possible in 2020, and we're looking at 2021.
And whether Ryanair, Cathal, insofar as we know they're predatory, we know they're ruthless in terms of their growth plans. I mean, I'm looking at the share price, $9.29, down from over €15. Are they a buy, or will they fall more?
I think a lot depends on how long this crisis continues. And just as speaking as a layperson, I wouldn't expect to see it relaxed, to see the rules relaxed until, the grand total of cases plateaus. And who can say exactly when that point might occur? But the longer the crisis continues, the more strain everybody's finances will come under, the more strain government's finances will come under. I think it's very hard to believe that we won't end up with fewer airlines next year than this year, either because some are forced to close down or because some are bought out by others.
And my question was about Ryanair share price.
Is that
well, yeah, and either of you. I mean, my point is this: don't waste a good crisis. Is this, Europe's biggest airline is Irish based? I mean, is this good for Ryanair or bad for Ryanair, Owen?
Ryanair's history is never waste a good crisis. Listeners will remember after 9/11, when everybody was mourning the fall of aviation, Michael O'Leary toddled off to Seattle and bought 120 aircraft. He was able to sell some of those after 3 years and 5 years of hard work for more secondhand than he paid for them because he got such a good bargain. He has a history of doing it, and that's why Ryanair share price, you've talked about that drop, is not as cataclysmic as some of the rivals have been. People who like aviation, and there are people who do it, will be drifting towards Ryanair shares rather than their alternatives. And you were asking how many airlines does Europe need? We're basically down to 5 that are going to probably see through this crisis. The biggest of all is the Lufthansa Group, Ryanair Group, pretty much neck and neck with them. IAG and Air France KLM are the others, and EasyJet, which is a strong record of performing on its own without government aid. The rest are all the ones that are running to governments, and I do think that when someone like Virgin Atlantic gets money off the British government, big lobby for that at the moment, Willie Walsh will be straight in and saying, why are you helping our rivals when we're providing this service without looking for cash? There'll be a lot of Me Too across the aviation industry. Not a good industry to be in. It's very threatened by current circumstances. If you are in the business of buying shares, Ryanair is one of the places you would be going because of their terrific track record in a downturn. But what is queering the pitch is the re-emergence of some of the things that we thought had gone away from the industry forever, such as state aid.
All right, with a glimpse of the future for aviation, both at home, across Europe and internationally. My thanks to Eoghan Corry, editor of Travel Extra, and earlier there Cathal Guiomard, lecturer in aviation management at DCU. Thank